Yeah, this week, intellectual property, copyright, is it all about to be destroyed by artificial intelligence? And there's lots of dimensions to this, Steve. I mean, we can look at company patent protection, for example. There's artwork. I mean, is that getting destroyed because AI can do it all itself? There's competitive behavior. We've talked about how being in a strong position because you own a lot of the technology, does that mean that you can behave in an anti-competitive way? That sort of is all part and parcel of the same thing. In other words, has artificial intelligence got the ability to make all of this much worse? But something that's got very little perhaps to do with AI, but I think it's a good starting point because it's been in the news a lot lately in the UK. So Eli Lilly, with their Mounjaro jab, you don't have to worry about this, but the thing that people inject to lose weight, you basically lose your...
Oh, yeah, I do need to worry about it, but I'm not going to do it.
Well, it's
I'd rather inject a bit more weightlifting into my life than a bit more drugs into my veins.
Right. Well, okay, which sounds an eminently more sensible way of doing it. But I mean, loads of people taking Mounjaro now because they want to lose weight. I mean, the way it works apparently is when you lose your appetite, I interviewed somebody about it and said, does that mean you don't enjoy food anymore? And they said, well, yeah, there is a bit of that.
You don't enjoy food or you don't feel like
you
food?
don't enjoy it as well. That's the.
Oh,
so I mean, that is that's a lot to give up, isn't it? Really. So I mean,
well, the older you get, the less you have other sorts of pleasures, and food becomes the remnant one, which is why I think people indulge so much as they get older.
It's such an old bit of society, isn't it? People getting together and socializing over food is, as old as history, as old as the hills. So the idea that we're going to get rid of that aspect of society, it's almost like the last pleasure we've got in this internet age. And they come along and say, no, we're going to take that from you as well. You have
if you're fat,
nothing left
if you're thin,
now.
You can have pleasure. If you're fat, you'd stuff you or unstuff you.
Yeah. So anyway, so look, they have spent, actually, the market for Mounjaro now is worth about $17 billion US a year. It's used by 5 million people worldwide. Most of those actually in the United States, but it's.
I have no idea why that would be the case.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Yeah,
none whatsoever.
But they will be looking so much thinner in those photographs in the United States from now on. We're going back to those 1970s.
And happier because they don't do their food as shit anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They've got absolutely nothing to lose there, have they? Absolutely.
That's right. Well, they won't want McDonald's food anymore. They don't even know it has a taste to begin with, and then they're all got enormous girths. So,
exactly. And now
thin Americans. Okay, I'll be on the lookout for thin Americans touring in Europe.
But
next
I mean, it's
time
not just America. I mean, the UK and Australia's got its fair share of fat people as well. Perhaps Europe's got a little less. But I don't know how French women. You don't see fat French women. I don't know. Perhaps they just look after themselves. I don't know. Or fat French men, really, more to the point. So, but you see those photographs, don't you, from the 1970s? You don't see fat people. I mean,
Yeah, it's a recent phenomenon. I mean, it's partly because we hop into metal boxes and travel around the world. We don't walk anymore. Like American cities are not designed for walking.
Yeah.
You can walk through New York. I mean, that can be actually better than going to the movies. But so long as most of the cities in America forget about walking to get anywhere, you simply got to have in a car.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, I think they have trains in some cities in America, don't they?
Yeah, there's some, not many. Yeah, so
buses, I think.
Yeah, so I'm going to Australia in a week's time. So you think I should set off now and walk, maybe, rather than
get used to it again? Yeah, Sydney. The difficulty with Sydney isn't and it's quite possible to walk around the heart of Sydney, as you know, and walking is not an uncommon activity. It's American cities and American houses and shopping centres simply aren't. Even walking from I've seen people drive from the car park to the front, drop somebody off and go back, park the car and then the same thing. And it's a sedentary civilization. So,
Anyway, well, just an interesting aside. We will get onto the topic in hand.
Okay.
So the maximum you pay in Sydney on public transport for a week is $50, 50 Australian dollars. So it's like 25 quid, which is actually
25 American,
or 25 pounds.
Pounds,
yeah.
Pounds, yeah.
So that's less than. So it costs about £40 to get from Farnham which is an hour's journey into London. So a lot less than a return train ticket into London is how much I would spend maximum for all buses, trains, ferries in Sydney for a week.
And on that front, Sydney has pretty poor public transport compared to cities in Europe.
Yeah,
so,
but Sydney's come a long way, though, in Sydney.
Yeah.
They've built...
But all this stuff, it just shows the extent to which sedentary lifestyles are created by the transportation systems we create. And the American transportation system is just absolutely designed to make you sedentary.
So you get in a car rather than walking to the train station.
Have you ever seen the old movie Who Killed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. And for those who haven't seen that cartoon, which is a brilliant cartoon, it explains that Los Angeles used to have a brilliant system of what do you call them, of trolley cars, so you could get around by public transport in Los Angeles quite easily.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the car industry did, and this is the backstory to the cartoon, is write them all off. So you had to get cars instead. So it wasn't a given that America was a car culture. It was created by destroying the previous public transportation system. And the other extreme, where I'm living in Amsterdam now, they faced the same thing, and the public went into such a huge protest about going to freeways from public transport that they blocked the freeway train, and now the bicycles, which everybody accepts as a natural part of Amsterdam, was actually created by public action against pushing them into automobiles for transportation.
Well, look, we've gone off at a bit of a tangent, but not totally, actually, because the point I was going to make about Mounjaro was that about 17 billion US dollars a year is how much they're making. And it's just going to mushroom. And the benefits could be extraordinary in terms of the social benefits if it means it gets rid of other complications. But 17 billion doesn't sound like bad payback because I'm trying to find the figures here. The most that Eli Lilly has spent on R&D in any one year is 10 billion. Now, that's across...
That's still quite a bit of money.
It is quite a bit of money, but that's across all of their projects. So I don't know how much, and I don't know how long they've been working on Mounjaro for. But, I'm reading stuff saying, well, Mounjaro might have a payback period of a couple of years. That's all.
Yeah.
And so
which is huge.
The reason why they're able to do that is because obviously they've got the economies of scale of doing so much research. And that is a barrier to other people getting in and doing the same thing. But they are charging a lot of money for those injections and about to push it up because Donald Trump basically said he doesn't want people to be able to get it cheaper anywhere else in the world. So Eli Lilly said, well, okay, we could either drop our prices in America or we could just push them up everywhere else. So of course, they said, well, we'll push them up everywhere else. So the UK...
Oh, that's so socially minded.
It's socially minded. Well, I mean, and there's the thing. So they've got a patent. They want to get their money back and as much... extra that they can get out of it. And so the social cost of that is, if it could be done cheaper, if you said, well, okay, it's only a couple of years payback period, if that, maybe 1 year, sell it, at the sort of payback you might expect on a large engineering project, which might be 20 or 30 years, not 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, this is an important issue in capitalism in general. And this is like my friend Avner Offer and his book, The Public-Private Divide, goes into this is a fair bit of detail. I'd like to go deeper still, as it happens, but that's the best book around at the moment about what is the divide between private provision of a service and public provision of a service. Yeah. And it largely comes down, as Avner argues, to the payback period. So if you look at the payback period for a private investment, if it's not in a matter of 5 or 10 years, then it simply isn't worth the company risking its assets for that length of time without getting a return, particularly when companies have to either get money off shareholders, so they expect dividends or capital gains, or they borrow from banks, and frankly a large part of the investment is actually covered by private borrowing for established companies like them. So there's too high a cost of capital, it's just not worth their while. The state, which creates its own money, which of course most people don't understand, but that means that the state doesn't have to look at a payback period, so it can do stuff that gives you a longer period of return. But the argument in favour of copyright in general is that you want entrepreneurs to get a return from what they've invented. But the system has been twisted over time more and more in favour, particularly in services, with extending copyright. So I think Mickey Mouse has just come off copyright. And every time that Mickey Mouse was about to expire from copyright, the American Congress would pass what became known as the Mickey Mouse Amendment, very appropriate, and that extend the period of copyright, which is ridiculous because Walt Disney, who invented that that cartoon character, has been dead for longer than most people alive have been alive.
Yeah.
At least he's dead at least 50 years ago. It's crazy that his descendants are getting that copyright. So there is a balance between the two, and I would rather. I can understand entrepreneurs wanting at least a decade after putting an investment in to get a return from it, but 100 years, forget it. That's ridiculous.
But the ethical question is, isn't it? So Eli Lilly, did all of this research to create this new wonder drug that is helping people to lose weight, which is going to save lives in the same way that statins have had an enormous impact. And the figures for that are staggering. So, there were trials. So the patent lapsed in 2006 for statins after about 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after 15 years, it came out of the patent. The prices dropped way more than 90%. It came from being quite an expensive drug to being a very, very cheap drug. And trials of...
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there we are. Everyone's got them, haven't they? I actually am on the borderline. I'm not taking them yet, but maybe I should. And some people say everyone of a certain age should just take it because they're so cheap now. I mean, it's like they work out wholesale price for a pack for a month's supply is about £1. Couple of dollars.
That's right. It's very, very
so
cheap.
£12 a year to protect everybody from heart conditions. And look, in 2019, there were 354 deaths per 100,000 from heart disease. In 2019, so sorry, I got that wrong. So it's gone from 354 deaths per 100,000 in the year 2000 to 239 in 2019. So in effect, over that period, 115 lives per 100,000 have been saved for the wholesale price of £1 per pack of 28. I mean, that is a no-brainer, isn't it, in terms of the, and that's deaths.
The benefit of making it publicly available, not as expensive as it was when it was paid.
But before that period, people were still dying of heart attacks because they couldn't afford it because the price was so high. And I feel like we are in exactly the same position with Mounjaro right now, which raises the question. There's a commercial benefit for the investment that's been made, but the impact on society has to wait 15 years.
And this is one reason why you do have public and private provision of different services, because if it's private, then it's got to be expensive initially, at least. I mean, I'm a classic early adopter of computer technology, so I've paid fortunes for computers at different times to get technology that other people aren't willing to pay the price for. But then over time, the quality drops and you finally find the consumer level is fine for even people like me. So you could expect a product privately to start expensive and then come down over time as the mass market expands. But there's still, it becomes a corporate decision will we do it. When if you look at the public benefit of not as many heart attacks, not as many people in hospitals, not as much need for medical staff for that particular reason, all these things are public benefits which the private price doesn't cover. So there is a point where you do want to say, okay, let's now make this publicly available. Let the price fall to the price of cost of production rather than the cost of innovation, which is what the patent
and of course we're paying. But I mean, it is being provided in the UK in some cases by the NHS, although not as much as they might.
That's where I get it from.
Yeah.
And it's comical because I've got to be in the NHS at the time I order in order to pick it up because I don't live there anymore.
But for Mounjaro, they're not issuing it to many people except very obese people. But obviously, the NHS just pays whatever price, and that would have been the case with statins as well. So the NHS, the UK is using government money or taxpayers' money or creative money, however you want to define it. But anyway,
let's not use taxpayers' money. I
know it's government money anyway that is
government money,
which is being spent to buy stuff that the private sector is pushing artificially high because the government's going to spend the money on it. I mean, that's the.
It's also a case of who can afford it. I mean, it's the supply and demand analysis, the multiple, the X meme of Marshall is such nonsense. But what it locks people into believing, you get a higher price, equilibrium price, yada, yada, yada. The price simply locks poor people out of having access to the goods.
Yeah.
And if you say that the society in general benefits if lots of poor people aren't dying of heart attacks, it means your production lines work better, et cetera, et cetera. There's a social benefit. And when the social benefit gets to be so enormous, then the firm can actually make as much money that way as they can out of restricting it to a small market, because rather than paying like $100 a pill to 0.1% of the population, you pay $100 a pill to 100% of the population, and you end up with a similar revenue level, depending on what your production costs are. Because the thing about things like that drug and so many initial innovations like that, the markup over the actual cost of production is huge. And this, again, is something mainstream economists can't understand, because they get this garbage argument that price is set by marginal cost equaling marginal revenue. Total bullshit, but they're happy to believe it because it keeps them in their fantasy world. Get rid of that thinking, and then you can say, well, do we want a high price point with a tiny part of the population, which is wealthy, being able to access this drug? Or do we want to have a low price with a huge part of population accessing, which is better for both for society, and can it be as profitable for the firm itself? Quite often the answer is yes to both questions.
Right, but how do you do that in reality? Because the company is going to be saying, well, we invented this thing. We've got to get paid back for it. We'll accept.
Yeah, well, they've got that's. I agree with that. I mean, like, having invented a new piece of software, I'm trying to get payback myself for the time and get more than I put into it as well, which justifies why I've spent a decade working on it. So I have an entrepreneur's understanding of the desire for entrepreneurs to get returns for their innovations. And that is if you have to say what is the essential feature of capitalism that makes it superior to previous social systems, without a doubt, it's funding entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do it well enough.
But here we're not. I mean, you think about entrepreneurs, you think about startups, people who've got a great idea and implement it. Here we're talking about big pharma.
That's right.
They've hit upon a winner through a lot of research. They've spent a lot of money on that research. So you could say, well, okay, so all of that, they've set up the systems to be able to do that. But there's a power principle at play here, isn't there? It's a bit.
There is.
Give you another example. In Australia, which we're both familiar with, the National Broadband Network. The whole reason that kicked off was it was a Kevin Rudd FU moment to Telstra, because
Yes, I remember.
Telstra had said, we will roll out fibre broadband to just about every home in Australia. We've got a plan to do that. Sol Trujillo, who was the CEO at the time, the Mexican chief of Telstra, said, but if we were to do that, and we'll spend all the money, we'll make all the investment, but we want, I can't remember what it was, we want a 10-year competition holiday, because Telstra was obliged to provide network access to other retail providers, even though they're operating as a wholesaler and retailer. So he said, we'll make all of that investment, but we want, I don't know what it was, 10 years competition holiday. So in other words, all of this infrastructure will only be used for our retail customers, and our wholesale customers can just, make do with what went before. And the response from the government was, well, F you, we're going to build our own bloody network, which was sort of like the knee-jerk reaction to it all. But that was another example, wasn't it, of a abusive position. And yet you could say, well, if they're making that investment, sure, they should get the return in the same way that Eli Lilly should get the return.
This is the whole question of the public-private divide. Yeah. Because Telstra, as we both know, used to be a government enterprise. Yeah. And then they privatised it and believed that was, competition is always better. If anything is wrong, add competition. It's the vitamin C of economists. And that was nonsense in the case of something like telecommunications at that scale, because you do not want what we actually got when the optical fibre rollout went before the NBN, which was 2 bloody sets of optical cables down some streets and 0 down others. Yeah. Because as you remember, your company, Optus, for meeting with Telstra to lay cable in wealthy streets with short gaps between the houses, while rich or poor or large gaps, forget it, you got nothing. So this is a classic case where privatising something was a big mistake. And then in that case, if I'd been in Rudd's position, rather than saying, as he literally did, adios to the Mexican chief of Telstra, I'd say, okay, we'll give you 5, something of that nature, because it's far better to have, again, this is the whole case of the internet is more effective if more people can connect to it. Even the people who are paying the up price benefit of people who aren't paying the front up price are on the system. You get more customers to communicate to you, you get more feedback. So this is a classic case of what they call, in economics, one of the few things that economists actually have any sense on is a network effect. And when there's a massive network effect, you're better to have it public provided. But of course, Australia did a classic series of stuff-ups on that front.
Yeah. And the network effect is, we can talk about that in the second half, because that is so important to where we are now, because so many companies are valued way beyond their assets because of that network impact. You know, all the social media networks are definitely doing well on the basis of all of that. But just going up to the break, what do you do then with companies like Eli Lilly who've made this investment? They've got a fairly short payback period, and if you could just say, well, okay, rather than waiting 15 years, can we have it now, so we can knock the price down while they're doing the opposite and pushing the price up because they can? How do you get over a situation like that? Do we say, well, okay, some of these drugs should be researched by the government. We should ramp up government investment in health. We should have a government part of big pharma. Or do we develop some sort of hybrid model? I mean, because it seems like at the moment it's, you know, the opportunity is wasted. Or maybe we just go, well, we wait 15 years. You know, they wouldn't. All of this is happening because of commercial enterprises employing the best people to arrive at these results.
And we'll discuss this after the break.
I thought we'd go to the break because I want to go off on a different tangent.
Okay, all right.
You want to stalk because you haven't got the answer to that one. That's what you're doing.
Well, I've got the answer to it. You simply you look at just, you know, how socially valuable is this product.
Yeah.
And if it's something which is, you know, you'd like to have a version of a Monet painting on your wall, then that's totally private and forget about any government involvement there. But if it's something which means the whole population is healthier, you reduce your chances of bad health outcomes, then we all benefit from that. And that's where you should say, well, let's, rather than you selling to a small part of the market which can afford the high price you've put on it, we're going to make a deal where you make the money out of the volume sales, but that means the price has to be reduced. So I'd be going into negotiations like that.
Yeah. And they might go, well, that's all fine, but we can still make more by selling less and charging a whole heap more, I guess. And you can't help feeling those negotiations with.
Well, there'd be an arbitrator in this case. I mean, because you would have some sort of capacity to say the government's made the case here, the private sector's fighting back. Let's look at the arguments in an open forum rather than having political bias one way or the other.
How much did you spend on this? Well, so you spent 20 billion. Tell you what, we'll give you the 20 billion. Just sell it at cost.
We'll give you 40 billion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Double your money, that sort of thing. We'll give it to you straight away. You don't need to wait until, you know, you've got sales. You can forget about marketing costs, et cetera, et cetera. There are various ways to make this negotiation sensibly.
Well, I wonder why those conversations don't take place. Maybe they are attempted, or maybe they just feel as though it's philosophically wrong and you've got to look after big pharma.
You've got a whole bunch of people in both sides of the equation believing neoclassical economics. That gets in the way of anything sensible.
All right. Get out in before the break. We are going to take that break now. Look, more about, we said we were going to talk about, you know, the impact of AI, and haven't we really touched on it? One area which perhaps, I'm sure AI had some part in that whole process, but, you know, the interesting areas when you get into art and brand and the role of AI in all of that. So we'll look at that when we come back on the Debunking Economics podcast.
After I sneeze.
Yeah, that's a nice one to go out with. So here's an interesting question, Steve, because we've looked at sort of like, you know, intellectual property rights in the first part. But what about, you know, art? What about art, Steve? I know all about. I don't know
much about art. I know what I like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. So all of that.
Or on the other hand, we could. So probably the modern. When I hear about art, I reach for my revolver. That's more the state of modern politics, isn't it? Goebbels.
So art, very crucial part of life, obviously. Understated part of human life. Actually, I feel like it's playing less of a role in our society than perhaps it should do. But can artwork, for example, be copyrighted if AI has been involved? Is the skill in art the skill of creating it, actually putting a paintbrush on a canvas, or is it the idea behind it? Could you actually be an artist who's actually crap at drawing, for example, but you're big on ideas? There's a question mark now about how we define art, isn't there? Because you don't necessarily have to be skilled to create a work of art.
Well, I've just been through this in my experience myself with Grok, wanting to create a cover for my book, Money and Macroeconomics from First Principles for Elon Musk and Other Engineers.
Available on Amazon.
And
Available
on Amazon and paperback as well as Kindle now. Thank God. We've got a very good system for enabling that on Amazon. So I'm going to quickly, I'm going to do a quick share here and just.
Okay.
Okay, let's see.
It's not going to work for people listening on the podcast, of course. But anyway, for everybody else.
That's my cover.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to get an artist to do a painting with Musk with the facial
so
expression
going to
he's
get
got on my
sued
cover.
by Elon Musk for this.
Oh, fun. Okay.
It's good publicity, I guess.
Good publicity.
Do you think you can expect more expensive
ways.
lawyers than
if
you
we
can?
get sued by we might get more listeners who actually pay us money. You never know.
Yeah, perhaps. But all
say,
that money's going to go on the lawsuit. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Lawyers win every time. We already know that. Capitalism is a system to keep lawyers fat. That's about it.
That's not a work of art, though, Steve. That's...
Oh, well, it's sort of. I mean, it's got, the illustrations. I specified all the bits and pieces I want, and I finally got that facial expression, and it's perfect. Now, if I wanted to draw that myself, which I could do bloody awfully, or I could commission an artist to do it bloody well and give that expression. So I've basically robbed an artist of the money he could have made from making a cover for me as a painting. That is going to be a major, because it's a major issue for the creative industry in general. The only thing that's in favour of the creative industry is it's often impossible to get exactly what you want.
No offense. I was going to say no offense, but I actually feel like graphic designers looking at that don't have too much to worry about, Steve. I feel like
well, that's hopeful. It's hopeful.
I
just wanted to cover in a hurry.
A decent graphic designer would do a better job. But but there is the question about what is art. So the question, if you use AI to create a piece of art that people perceive as something that's worth hanging on the wall. Then is that really art? Should you be paid the same amount for it? Should it, but more to the point, if somebody says, well, there we are, you used AI for that, I'm going to copy that and make prints out of it and make money. Have you got?
Or the real point is when people create an artwork which is based on an existing artwork, and then God knows where the photograph got for that came from Musk.
Yeah, all of those elements. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's mainly saying we're effectively using what people have created as a way of creating an AI image is a form of infringement of copyright.
Yeah, and that's AI from the ground up, because AI is basically getting stuff off the internet. It's getting stuff that people have written and using that to form an argument or develop a piece of copy. It's not dreaming this stuff up from nothing. Someone wrote that somewhere. A journalist wrote it, is not getting paid. Somebody's written a blog that's being used and it's not getting paid. It's impossible to decipher where all of these things come from. It's a bit like arguing, when you appear in search results, most people say that's a good thing because it's driving traffic, but also it could, those top lines or whatever could help people. Now it's being put into AI where you don't even need to visit that site. So you're not even getting the traffic. You're just getting used for AI. I mean, it seems like there's a huge amount of potential copyright infringement that's not being addressed, and we're all just getting used by AI. I'll give you another example as well. If I say somebody wrote a book, and they're not a great writer, but they've got a great concept, and they write the book which explains the concept but doesn't exactly get it spot on. Say, for example, I said, right, debunking economics, full of great ideas, bloody heavy read. I'm going to write a new version of debunking economics.
Debunk economics for dummies.
And put my name on it, and say I'm not going to give Steve any of this because I've rewritten this in a way using all of his concepts. Your concepts copyright? It could be applied to anything. If somebody writes a book badly, somebody else writes it better, but the concept's the same characters. They've just changed the names or whatever. So the question of where you define copyright, and it's such a woolly area.
That's a major thing in Hollywood. I mean, a huge part of law cases in Hollywood and any movie making centre is over people taking somebody else's idea and repackaging it, and then they will sue. That's my original idea. You have to pay me. So a lot of the lawyers in Los Angeles live off that particular dispute, but it's a genuine one because you can come up with an idea and then execute it poorly, or even well, but just not have the right actors in it, and somebody repackages it, and you've got your ideas being stolen. So it comes down to this. This is an important issue in terms of how capitalism actually functions, because as I said beforehand, if you had to get one defining characteristic of capitalism which makes it superior to any other social system, it's the extent to which it encourages entrepreneurial behaviour. Okay? It also undermines entrepreneurial behaviour. and this is the point. The fact that people can get paid money because they have an original idea, which they then benefit from. Then we also have people suppressing original ideas. You remember the old joke about Microsoft that they wouldn't release a new version of Windows until such time as WordPerfect failed? Okay, undermining competitors that way.
Yeah.
These days, by the way, really original Microsoft now, often I boot Windows 11 and it won't even start Windows programs. Microsoft programs fail to start.
I found
somebody's overachieved inside Microsoft's
But I mean, you look at the early versions of Windows and there were lawsuits because they were making it very difficult for you to download Netscape. You had to basically use Windows Explorer to use the internet, and that's another area, isn't it, where you've got this abuse of power. I mean, it's a bit like the Eli Lilly case, and you can look at a lot of that on the internet, where companies are preventing other people, like the Apple Store, for example, and having to pay almost like mafia money to be in there.
And also, just another point, Apple, and they were complaining about it, but it's a major change. They used to have the Lightning adapter, and they changed it every damn model, and they were finally forced to adopt the USB-C standard, which is now the latest. I've got one of them, so I know that's the case. So there are areas where people use innovation as a weapon against other people who are also innovating. It's not easy to resolve. There are for example, in patenting, which you'd think would be something which has been resolved successfully by capitalism after the last quarter of a millennium, to get copyright on a software invention, which I've done, of course, you have to go copyright in every bloody country on the planet. Now, I can only afford 2, so Ravel is copyrighted in the USA and Australia, but not elsewhere. And that means that the costs for a small entity like myself to get into the copyright scene is huge, whereas that's a trivial cost for an organisation like Microsoft and so on. So you end up with an unlevel playing field, which is biased in favour of current occupants, and that is a restriction to what's good about capitalism, not an enhancement of it.
So for those who aren't familiar, and I'll probably describe this badly, but here's my interpretation of it. You can add to it. But Ravel is basically the idea of like a multi-dimensional spreadsheet in a way, where you can take disparate actors and link them together and form a relationship on multiple levels and decide how you want them all to hook up, so you can build complex models. That's basically the idea behind it.
The idea of Ravel is a tool that lets you handle data that has more than 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
Whereas what the standard people, they use spreadsheets, and fundamentally spreadsheets handle rows and columns, and that's it. And we handle rows, columns, and multiple.
And if you wanted to add another dimension, you've got to add another spreadsheet and then link those spreadsheets together.
Or a tab and that sort of garbage. Yeah. Or you use a pivot table, which is a nuisance for everybody. A few people understand pivot tables. Most people are turned off by them. So I've developed a graphical means that you can handle 12-dimensional data and do analysis of it far more easily than by doing
so that's the concept. So someone comes along and says, well, okay, we can do that more efficiently than you've done it. We're going to launch it. Have you patented exactly?
Only America and Australia.
What exactly have you patented?
The actual device, the actual multidimensional object called a Ravel.
Right.
So that's patented.
So somebody could come along, could be listening to this and say, that sounds easy. I think I could do that. I'll get my developers.
If they're not in Australia and not in America and didn't want to sell to the Australian or American market. So the idea is to...
Right, but they could do something. They could say, look, multidimensional data, providing an interface for that. We'll do that. Your concept's how you're doing it, not actually what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it? It's the concept rather than it's how we do it rather than the concept. I think we've done it extremely well, but somebody else could. The thing is, without patent protection, somebody in another country could say, "I was going to do exactly what they've done," but then what they face is, I can't defend that. I've got to defend it by having a better software.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if Microsoft tries to do it, then I'd say if you try to sell a single copy in America, not going to. Well, you're going to probably do it, but I'll try to sue you or do something or get some sort of settlement. So the best barrier we could get was just to have those 2 countries.
Right.
And this is an example where the copyright is not good enough. The legal work to support the major advantage of capitalism, the entrepreneurial stimulus. The legal system doesn't support it, and it's actually, again, that's why I say capitalism is a way of feeding lawyers.
Yeah, but and I just wonder whether we're just going to give up because at some point in a few years' time, people will say, okay, great concept. AI can write it in next to no time. Same as that book.
That's I'm getting some feedback from professional coders about the quality of
AI.
What they call it vibe coding, don't they?
Yeah.
And like maybe it'll get there at some point, but there would be hallucinations in the middle there, and you do not want to get your code caught in something.
Now that's where we are now. But 5 or 10 years, the speed at which it's moving. So say it can be done. The same as somebody writes a book, AI says we can do it better. And so the ability for you to protect a piece of work becomes difficult because that piece of work, whether it's just added to something else, just like music is, music might be redefined or rewritten based on a concept. The only thing that's pure, or you can go back to in all of this, is who had that original idea and are they getting any payback for that? And that will be so difficult to prove. In a world where there's so many strands to it, so much stuff is being meshed together. So does this then become the case where we say, okay, we get back to where we've been in recent weeks, universal basic income, where we say, well, people have just got to be paid to create because so much of this stuff is going to be done by machines. And if out of all of that, we actually get back to people saying, well, okay, sick of all of that, I'm going to get a brush and I'm going to start stroking paint onto canvas. And I won't be like all those famous painters who died destitute, like Van Gogh, for example.
Without their ears.
Yeah. So, and some Rembrandt and, so many other composers and artists and writers.
Mozart does a pauper's grave.
Emily Dickinson, the US poet. Hope is just one line from one of her. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul. So that you don't get AI right and stuff like that, do you? But so if give people time, give humanity time, then they could actually do this sort of stuff and get paid for it. Now they may not become billionaires, but I don't think artists want to be billionaires. They just want to be able to survive. This ability to have pure art that AI hasn't stuck its fingers in and messed up still needs to happen, doesn't it? So again, I wonder whether we do need to talk seriously about UBI to counter.
If capitalism survives climate change, which I don't think it will,
right.
But if it does, then yes, on the other side of that, we have to say that if robots can do the vast majority of unskilled labour, which looks quite feasible. And then if AI does, advertising and half the movies, et cetera, you're going to have a whole lot of people who can't find anything to do. And without it, UBI will starve, and that's you end up in Hunger Games. So at some point we would have to transit to a world in which your provision of the capacity to buy your basic needs would not be something you had to work for. It'd be provided by society. And then if you wanted to get above that, then you'd have to become one of these entrepreneurs who do things that AI can't. And I think that's the world that Musk has in his head is what we're all going to get to. But my worry is more likely to get billionaires buying themselves robot armies, and we'll be on our way towards Star Trek.
I don't see Musk as being an art lover myself. I mean, I could be doing him a disservice, but this idea that we are in a world where computers drive everything, the natural counter to that has to be to say, well, I want to go and look at stuff in an art gallery that's been painted by a human being without computers involved. And we've got to, and you can, it's going to be impossible to copyright that sort of work because who knows how it's taken. Someone in the art gallery takes a photograph and then all of a sudden it goes into the cyber world. It's almost pointless to try and protect copyright anymore is the way I'm seeing it. We are going to very quickly reach the point where copyright is just something, we may as well forget about paying lawyers because they'll charge a lot and never reach a conclusion because it's just going to get...
The AI writes the legal draft anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, is that the upshot that, there's the commercial world, which can go down the whole AI road as much as it wants. We've got to separate art out, and we also have to separate out social welfare. and inventions that may come from a commercial enterprise that have got a social benefit in the same way that art has a social benefit needs to be paid for by the state. And as you say, that could be by saying, well, okay, let's negotiate with the commercial enterprises to give them what they see as being a fair payback for their work.
And it's also the EBI, meaning government-created money goes to people so they can buy the output of the firms and so on, and the firms benefit. This is actually, just to bring in a bit of economic theory here, Koleski made this case. Mikhail Koleski, the great Polish engineer turned economist, argued that government spending ends up as part of the profit of the capitalists. So the more government spends above taxation, the higher the profit level of capitalists. Ironically, and he's quite correct when you do the accounting, it's true that government spending ultimately ends up in the pockets of capitalists, not it passes through workers. The workers buy the goods and the capitalists get the revenue from that. So government spending benefits capitalists. And to say, just being realistic about that and saying, well, if we have a world in which technological development, robots and AI mean that the vast majority of people are not needed for work, then we keep them alive with a UBI that means they can buy the goods, so you make the profits and you get the much higher income courtesy of that. But you then enable individuals because they're not terrified about whether they can pay the rent, pay the mortgage, they can then innovate, some of them, well, not everybody obviously, and that you want that innovation to still be possible and perhaps to mean, do you do it for money? Okay, do you do the art for money or do you do the art for your own self-satisfaction? The vast majority of people, and I've got quite a few friends I know doing this now in their older ages, paint for their own pleasure.
Yeah, of course.
But so they're not going to make money out of it. But there's a handful who are going to come up with something new, something powerful, emotional, or whatever else, in whatever way it's powerful, and they do want to sell that. So we've got to navigate. We should be using AI to make it possible for people who have not intelligence but imagination that AI still hasn't cracked.
Yeah.
We still want to encourage that.
But I think that's why I was trying to get to this idea of it's the concept that is the protected element. How it's applied
rather than the execution
can be done any number of ways now. So it's the concept. So how do you protect the concept is the difficulty. So somebody paints that powerful picture that says something to so many people, and then that gets ripped off and spread around the internet to such a point that its source is lost. Yeah. How do you compensate that person? Or do you just say, well, sorry, great idea, fantastic, you've contributed to society. You're never going to get wealthy from that because it's already gone on the internet. We can't do anything about that. But nice job.
It comes down to the division between AI and AI, artificial intelligence versus artificial imagination. Now, at the moment, AI really is. It's pattern recognition and pattern generation. It can only use what's currently being created. The stuff we're talking about is something totally new. And then in that case, you say, could AI have created what is the source here? The answer is no. Then that person deserves to be compensated.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Rewarded. Yeah. And I don't think that's going to happen. Because
neither do I.
So it's a vain hope. And do you know why I think it's a vain hope? Because you'd be thinking, if someone creates something which is unique and original, then they should get rewarded for that. Because people will say, well, I love this work. I'm going to pay for the authentic copy. I'm either going to be the one who pays the millions for the original, or I'm going to, or this copy's made, which the money goes back to the artist. And I'm going to buy those bona fide copies that haven't been influenced by AI in any way, so that the artist gets payback. Because I love the idea that they've created this concept and I want to help them. You'd be thinking that would be the approach by humans. But then at the same time, people say, Gucci,
I can make a buck out of it. I'm going to roll over the top of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I like Gucci handbags, so but I don't want to pay all that money for it, so I'm going to pay for a fake.
And this comes out of the discussion we had with Giannis about techno-feudalism, because the more the power concentrates in capitalism, the more potential you are to go from the innovative, rewarding capitalist system to the possession of property feudal system. And that undermines the latter. So we've always got this balancing act. When somebody succeeds in capitalism through innovation, quite potentially, and you can argue that Musk has done that, they get to the point where they've got a capacity to squeeze other people out by sheer power, and that then undermines the original innovation.
So in conclusion, because we've moved around quite a bit, but I just wonder whether we say, in the future we have to arrive at a situation where we say, yeah, there's capitalism, and there is creativity, and creativity can't exist. It struggled, artists struggled historically But everyone's going to struggle, from graphic designers right up to, fine works of art, because there's not going to be the payback. We almost have to pay them for what they add to our soul, for what they add to society. Governments have got to pay that.
And that comes, the public-private divide comes down, and in that case, it's better if the public provides the capacity for artists to be artists.
Yeah, and make us all fuller human beings as a result, rather than being stuck on tech.
We hope so.
Big ask, isn't it? Big transformation in society. Could happen. Let's hope so. But as you say, climate change is going to destroy us before we get there. But if not, then let's look for a fruitful future where we are all spending our time enjoying art, which, I think as you get older, you start to realize that that's the most important thing in life, isn't it? So
quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Okay.
See you next time, Steve.
Indeed, mate. Okay, see you then. Bye.